The 1st of September, 1939. Nazi Germany invades Poland, triggering World War II. The German Luftwaffe, one of the most technologically advanced air forces in the world, proves instrumental in the German victories across Poland and Western Europe in 1939 and 1940. However, as the war drags on, the Luftwaffe is eroded in strength, and German defeats at the Battle of Stalingrad and in the Battle of Kursk in 1943 ensure the gradual decline of the Wehrmacht on the Eastern Front. The failure to maximize production immediately after the failures in the Soviet Union and in North Africa ensures the Luftwaffe's effective defeat in the period of September 1943 and February 1944. As a result, in 1943 and 1944, aircraft production is moved to concentration camps in order to alleviate labor shortages and to protect production from Allied air raids. The two largest aircraft factories in Germany are located in Mauthausen-Gusen and Mittelbau-Dora concentration camps. Aircraft parts are also manufactured at Flossenbürg, Buchenwald, Dachau, Ravensbrück, and other concentration camps. In 1944 and 1945, as many as 90,000 concentration camp prisoners work in the aviation industry and equate to about 1/10 of the concentration camp population over the winter of 1944 to 1945. One man who was behind the Luftwaffe aircraft production, armament and supply, as well as the use of slave labor of civilians and prisoners of war for German aircraft production, is a Nazi Field Marshal with Jewish origins, Erhard Milch. Erhard Milch was born on the 30th of March, 1892, in Wilhelmshaven, then part of the German Empire. Erhard was the son of Anton Milch, a Jewish pharmacist who served in the Imperial German Navy, and his non-Jewish wife Clara. In 1910, Milch enlisted in the German Army, where 1 year later he rose to the rank of lieutenant of the Foot Artillery Regiment. At the beginning of the First World War, which started on the 28th of July, 1914, Milch commanded an artillery unit in East Prussia. In July 1915, he was trained and deployed as an aircraft observer on the Western Front, seeing action on the Somme in 1916 and later in Flanders during 1917. He was also awarded the Iron Cross First Class, and shortly before the end of the war, he was promoted to captain and appointed to command a fighter wing, Jagdgruppe 6, even though he had never trained as a pilot and could not fly himself. The First World War ended on the 11th of November 1918, when the German leaders signed the armistice in the Compiègne forest in France. 2 years later, in 1920, Milch resigned from the military to pursue a career in civil aviation. With squadron colleague Gotthard Sachsenberg, Milch formed a small airline in Danzig, today's Gdansk, which linked the city to the Baltic states. In 1926, Milch was named a technical director and board member of the newly formed airline Deutsche Luft Hansa, the forerunner of the modern German airline Lufthansa, which served as a German flag carrier. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party came into power in Germany in January 1933. On the 27th of April of the same year, the Nazis created the Ministry of Aviation, which was in charge of development and production of all aircraft development, designed and built in Germany during the existence of the Third Reich, overseeing all matters concerning both military and civilian designs. In the newly formed ministry, Erhard Milch took up a position as a state secretary, answering directly to Hermann Göring, the minister. In this capacity, Milch was instrumental in establishing the Luftwaffe, the air force of Nazi Germany, and oversaw the planning and development of some of the best aircraft in the world, like the Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighter plane that was alongside the Focke-Wulf FW-190, the backbone of the Luftwaffe's fighter force. On the 15th of September, 1935, the Nazi regime announced two new laws. The Reich Citizenship Law, which declared that only Aryans could be citizens of the Reich, and the Law for the Protection of German Blood and Honor, which forbade marriages and extramarital sexual relations between Germans and Jews, the employment of German maids under the age of 45 in Jewish homes, and the raising of the German flag by Jews. These laws informally became known as the Nuremberg Laws, or Nuremberg Race Laws, because they were first announced at a Nazi Party rally held in the German city of Nuremberg. The Nazis enacted the Nuremberg Laws, which became the legal basis for the racist anti-Jewish policy in Germany, because they wanted to put their ideas about race into law. They believed in the false theory that the world is divided into distinct races that are not equally strong and valuable. The Nazis considered Germans to be members of the supposedly superior Aryan race. They saw the so-called Aryan German race as the strongest and most valuable race of all. According to the Nazis, Jews were not Aryans. They thought Jews belonged to a separate race that was inferior to all other races. The Nazis believed that the presence of Jews in Germany threatened the German people, and that they had to separate Jews from other Germans to protect and strengthen Germany. 13 additional decrees were added to the Nuremberg laws over the next 8 years. These included the first official definition of who was to be considered a Jew and who an Aryan. Jews with 3 or 4 Jewish grandparents were considered full-blooded Jews. According to the Nuremberg laws, Erhard Milch was a Mischling of the first grade. Mischling was a pejorative legal term used in Nazi Germany to denote persons of mixed Aryan and non-Aryan ancestry. In 1935, doubts about the ethnic origin of Erhard Milch began when rumors circulated that his father, Anton Milch, was Jewish. The Gestapo began an investigation, but it was stopped by Hermann Göring, who forced Erhard's mother to sign a document that Anton Milch was not the true father of Erhard and his 4 siblings, but that it was her uncle Karl Brauer. That would mean that Milch's mother, Clara, committed not only adultery, but also incest. Clara's uncle, as well as husband, were deceased at the time when this documentation was put together. When this evidence was presented to Hitler, he accepted it and declared Milch a 100% Aryan. Those events, and the later extension of the certificate of German blood, were the background to Göring's statement, "I decide who is a Jew in the Air Force." Milch's case shows that the Nazis did not object to incest, but Jewish ancestry was indeed a problem. On the 1st of February 1939, Milch, now with the rank of Generaloberst, which was equivalent to Colonel General, was given the additional job of Inspector General of the Luftwaffe, frequently attending conferences on behalf of Göring. World War II started on the 1st of September 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. The campaign in Poland ended on the 6th of October the same year, with Germany and the Soviet Union dividing and annexing the whole of the country. During the invasion of Denmark and Norway, which was codenamed Operation Weserübung, Milch commanded Luftlotte 5, which was one of the primary divisions of the German Luftwaffe in World War II, formed in April 1940 for the invasion of Norway. Nazi Germany invaded Denmark and Norway on the 9th of April 1940. Strategically, Denmark's importance to Germany was as a staging area for operations in Norway. In Norway, Germany sought to secure naval bases for use against the British fleet in the North Sea and to guarantee vital iron ore shipments from neutral Sweden, on which Nazi Germany was dependent. While the invasion of Denmark lasted less than 6 hours and was the shortest military campaign conducted by the Germans during the war, Norway surrendered to Germany only after 2 months on the 10th of June 1940. In the great wave of promotions that followed the fall of France, in June the same year, Milch was promoted to Field Marshal during Field Marshal's ceremony held in Berlin, in which Adolf Hitler promoted 12 generals to the rank of Field Marshal on the 19th of July 1940. It was the first occasion in World War II that Hitler appointed Field Marshals due to military achievements. Following the suicide of Colonel General Ernst Udet in November 1941, Milch succeeded him as Chief of Procurement and Supply and became responsible for all Luftwaffe aircraft production, armament and supply. This was a massive organization, supervising over 26 departments, and requiring organizational qualities for which Udet had not been best equipped. Udet had neglected the technical development of the Luftwaffe, and shortened the production cycles of new types by releasing them for production before they were ready for series production. Milch cancelled production of the ineffective and dangerous Heinkel 177 and heavy fighter Messerschmitt Me-210, and put them back in development. The failure of the Me-210's development program meant that the Luftwaffe was forced to continue operating the Bf 110 after it had become outdated despite mounting losses. In April 1942, Milch was named to the Central Planning Board along with Albert Speer, Reich Minister of Armaments and War Production, and Paul Körner, State Secretary of the 4-year Plan, in an effort to coordinate control over all industrial war production. The same year, he received an endowment of 250,000 Reichsmarks from Adolf Hitler, with which he could buy himself an estate. In January 1943, Hitler, who valued Milch's talent for organizational skill, gave him the task of providing air supplies to the surrounded units of the Sixth Army in the Battle of Stalingrad, which had previously been Göring's task. When the Sixth Army was surrounded by the end of November in Operation Uranus, Göring promised that the Luftwaffe would be able to deliver a minimum of 300 tons of supplies to the trapped men every day. On the basis of these assurances, Hitler demanded that there be no retreat. They were to fight to the last man. Though some airlifts were able to get through, the amount of supplies delivered never exceeded 120 tons per day. To save the situation, Milch traveled directly to the front with close associates from the Reich Air Ministry. However, it was too late. The task turned out to be unattainable. There were too few flying personnel, too few aircraft, and in particular, no suitable airfields and landing sites within reach of Stalingrad. Soon after, the German Sixth Army, regarded as the best field army in the Wehrmacht, surrendered between the 31st of January and the 2nd of February 1943. German casualties were 147,200 killed and wounded, and over 91,000 captured, including 24 generals and 2,500 officers of lesser rank. At the time of the surrender, the Red Army soldiers were well nourished, full of vigor, and dressed in fine winter uniforms. The German soldiers, ragged, in thin greatcoats over threadbare uniforms, as thin as skeletons, presented emaciated figures, exhausted half to death, with sunken features. Unwashed, with unkempt beards, they wore comical-looking makeshift snow boots and were wrapped in towels and women's headscarves. Weakened by disease, starvation, and lack of medical care during the encirclement, they were sent on foot marches to prisoner camps and later to labor camps all over the Soviet Union. Some 35,000 were eventually sent on transports, of which 17,000 did not survive. Most died of wounds, disease, particularly typhus, cold, overwork, mistreatment, and malnutrition. Some were kept in the city to help rebuild it. Only 5,000 to 6,000 would return to Germany after the war. By this time, Milch had passed the zenith of his career. The ever-increasing Allied air raids on Reich territory from the summer of 1943 and the associated loss of air sovereignty ultimately led to a loss of confidence on the part of both Hermann Göring and Adolf Hitler. This loss of power continued when at the beginning of 1944, after devastating Allied attacks on German cities and armaments targets during the Allied Big Week from the 20th to the 25th of February 1944, Milch had to hand over fighter production to the Ministry of Armament and War Production, led by Albert Speer. From March 1944, Milch, together with Speer, established a Fighter Staff Committee, a task force to increase the production of fighter aircraft, in part by moving the production facilities underground. In cooperation with the SS, the task force played a key role in the exploitation of slave labor for the benefit of the German aircraft industry and the Luftwaffe. Production of German fighter aircraft more than doubled between 1943 and 1944. The growth, however, consisted in large part of models that were becoming obsolescent and proved easy prey for Allied aircraft. The SS provided 64,000 prisoners for 20 separate projects for various concentration camps including Mittelbau-Dora. Prisoners worked for Junkers, Messerschmitt, Henschel, and BMW among others. By 1944, 140,000 people were working in Speer's underground factories, which were death traps. Discipline was brutal, with regular executions. Such was the case of the Mittelbau-Dora underground factory. There were so many corpses that the crematorium was overwhelmed. Speer's own staff described the conditions there as hell. In 1944, Milch sided with Josef Goebbels, the propaganda minister, and Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, in attempting to convince Adolf Hitler to remove Göring from the command of the Luftwaffe. However, Hitler refused, and Göring retaliated by forcing Milch out of his positions as State Secretary and Chief of Procurement and Supply on the 20th of June, 1944. In August of the same year, Milch was appointed as Speer's deputy, but was sidelined and achieved little. In the fall of 1944, he was injured in a car accident and hospitalized for several weeks. In March 1945, Milch was placed into the Führer Reserve, which was a pool of temporarily unoccupied high-ranking military officers awaiting new assignments. However, he was never reassigned. Following Hitler's suicide, Erhard Milch attempted to flee Germany, but was apprehended by Allied forces on the Baltic coast on the 4th of May, 1945. Upon surrendering, he presented his Field Marshal's baton to British Brigadier Derek Mills-Roberts, who was so disgusted and angered by the atrocities he had seen when liberating the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, that he demanded to know Milch's thoughts on the terrible sights witnessed. Milch's reply in English was supposedly along the lines of, "These people are not human beings in the same way as you and me." This so infuriated Milch-Roberts that he seized the Field Marshal's baton from under Milch's arm and proceeded to brutally beat Milch over the head with it until it broke, afterwards switching to a champagne bottle. The following day, Milch-Roberts went to Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery to apologize for losing his temper with a senior German prisoner of war, only for Montgomery to cover his head with his hands in mock self-protection and joke, "I hear you've got a thing about field marshals," with nothing more said regarding Milch-Roberts' indiscretion. The incident left Milch, Nazi field marshal with Jewish origins, with several contusions and a fractured skull. In the end, justice finally caught up with Milch when he was tried at the Milch trial, which began on the 2nd of January, 1947. His indictment listed 3 counts. Participation in the planning and execution of war crimes, namely the subjection of prisoners of war and foreign nationals to murder, cruel treatment, and forced labor. Participation in the planning and execution of war crimes, specifically participation in 2 medical experiments dealing with the effects of high altitude and freezing, and crimes against humanity. Milch pleaded not guilty on all charges and denied everything. When he was asked if he had knowledge that there had been mass deportations of Jews to the Eastern Territories, and when he first heard about it, he replied, "I cannot give the exact date. Once, in some way or another, I can no longer remember how, the information did reach me that Jews had been settled in special ghetto towns in the East. I think it must have been in 1944 or thereabout, but I cannot guarantee that this date is exact." When he was asked if he knew that these mass deportations were, in effect, a preliminary step to mass extermination, he replied, "No, we were never told that." When questioned if he had any idea about the existence of the Auschwitz extermination camp, he replied, "No, I first heard of the name much later. I read it in the press after I was captured." Considering his position in the Third Reich, this was clearly a lie, and it was not the only one. In relation to Einsatzkommandos that were deployed in the East to carry out large-scale extermination of Jews, he claimed, "The first I heard of these Einsatzkommandos was here in prison in Nuremberg. I know nothing at all about the extermination of Jewish citizens." 1 year earlier, during the Nuremberg trials in 1946, Milch, then a witness for the prosecution, had also been questioned about his Jewish father and Göring's role in the matter by Chief United States Prosecutor Robert H. Jackson. When Jackson asked Erhard Milch, "Göring made you what you call a full Aryan, was that it?" Milch replied, "I do not think he made me one. I was one." Even in the end, Milch could not acknowledge that his father was a Jew, and he himself was a key figure in the Nazi regime, which was responsible for the mass murder of 6 million Jews. However, his lies did not help him escape justice. After 39 trial days, with 34 witnesses and 212 written exhibits introduced, the trial concluded on the 25th of March, 1947. On the 17th of April, the American Military Tribunal found Erhard Milch guilty of counts 1 and 3, war crimes and crimes against humanity, and sentenced him to life imprisonment at Rebdorf prison near Munich. However, in 1951, the sentence was commuted to 15 years, and in June 1954, Milch was paroled. He lived out the remainder of his life as a free man in Düsseldorf. Milch, the last living Luftwaffe Field Marshal, was 79 years old when he died on the 25th of January, 1972. There were no tears shed for Erhard Milch. Thanks for watching the World History channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.